Mommy, did we do something bad? The question broke something inside Amara's chest. She turned in her seat to face her children. No, baby girl. You didn't do anything bad. You could never do anything bad enough for this. Then why don't they want us anymore? Amara closed her eyes, searching for words that could explain prejudice to children who'd only known love. How do you tell 5-year-olds that some people believe their worth is determined by the color of their skin, the texture of their hair, the complicated math of their bloodline? Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Because tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. The mahogany casket lowered into the ground, taking with it the only bridge between two worlds, leaving Amara Williams to face her husband's family alone, unaware that she was worth more than all of them combined. The hospital room still smelled of disinfectant and dying flowers. Amara sat in the plastic chair beside the empty bed, her dark fingers tracing the blanket where James had taken his last breath 3 days ago. The twins, Kai and Kaya, pressed against her sides, 5 years old and too young to understand why Daddy wouldn't wake up, but old enough to feel the tremor in their mother's hands. "Mommy, when are we going home?" Kaya whispered, her thumb finding her mouth the way it had when she was a baby. Home. The word caught in Amara's throat. The Whitmore estate had never truly been home, not in the 2 years since she'd married James. It had been a beautiful prison where she'd learned to move quietly through marble hallways, where her laughter was too loud and her presence was tolerated. But it was where James had loved her, where the twins had taken their first steps on Persian rugs worth more than most people's cars. "Soon, baby girl," she whispered back, pressing a kiss to Kaya's forehead. The lie tasted bitter. Her phone buzzed. Another text from Victoria Whitmore, her mother-in-law. "The reading of the will is tomorrow at 2 p.m. Please ensure the children are properly dressed." Properly dressed. As if Amara didn't know how to dress her own children. As if she hadn't been the one buying their clothes, combing their hair, wiping their tears while James worked 16-hour days, trying to prove himself worthy of the family business that would never truly accept him either. Kai stirred against her, his small hand clutching her worn sweater. "Mommy smells sad," he said simply. Children saw truth that adults spent lifetimes hiding from. Amara did smell sad, like grief and exhaustion, and the particular fear that comes with being completely alone in a world that had never wanted you. 15 miles away, in the climate-controlled silence of the Whitmore family library, Victoria Whitmore stood before floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a view of manicured gardens her great-grandfather had designed. She held a crystal tumbler of bourbon, James's favorite, though she'd never understood his common tastes, and tried to process a world without her eldest son. The funeral had been adequate, respectful. The right people had come, said the right things. But that woman, Amara, had stood at the graveside like she belonged there, like her grief was equal to a mother's grief. Like those mixed-race children were true Whitmores. Victoria's reflection stared back from the window. Silver hair perfectly set, pearls that had belonged to her grandmother, the kind of understated elegance that whispered old money. She was 63 and had never questioned her place in the world, had never doubted that breeding and bloodline mattered. Until James brought home that girl. Not that Amara was without qualities. She was beautiful, Victoria could admit that privately. Intelligent enough. She'd been working on some advanced degree in social work when James met her. And she clearly loved James, loved those children. But love didn't change genetics. Love didn't erase the uncomfortable reality of what people saw when they looked at the Whitmore family now. The library door opened without a knock. Only one person would dare. Mother. Harrison Whitmore two-stepped into the room, adjusting gold cufflinks that had belonged to his father. At 35, he was James's younger brother by 3 years, and had spent those 3 years in his shadow, always the spare, never the heir. Until now. "The arrangements are made," he said, settling into the leather chair that had been their father's. "The will reading tomorrow will be straightforward." Victoria turned from the window. "And the girl?" Amara will receive the standard widow's portion. Enough to be comfortable, but not excessive. The bulk of James's estate will naturally revert to you, then to me upon your passing. The children will have trust funds, of course. Substantial ones. They are Whitmore's, whatever else they might be. Whatever else they might be. The phrase hung in the air like smoke. She can't stay at the estate, Victoria said finally. It wouldn't be appropriate. A young woman, alone with children. People would talk. Harrison nodded. He'd been waiting for this moment, this conversation. I've found her a suitable place. A townhouse in Riverside. Good schools nearby for the children. She'll want to return to work eventually, I imagine. Riverside. A nice enough area. Upper middle class, diverse. The kind of place where a black woman with biracial children could blend in, be comfortable. Harrison had chosen well. The children can visit, of course, Victoria added, the words feeling strange in her mouth. They're still family. But even as she said it, she knew visits would be awkward affairs. Scheduled. Supervised. The natural ease that James had somehow maintained between these two worlds would die with him. Through the window, Victoria watched the groundskeeper preparing the gardens for winter. Everything had its season, its proper place. Order must be maintained. Tomorrow, after the will reading, she would reclaim her son's house. She would pack away his things, donate his clothes, slowly erase the evidence of his choices. The twins would grow up knowing they were Whitmore's, but understanding they belonged to a different world. And Amara would learn what Victoria had always known. That love, however genuine, was not enough to bridge certain gaps. Some doors, once closed, remained closed forever. The law offices of Pemberton and Associates smelled like old leather and older money. Amara sat in an antique chair that probably cost more than her car, the twins fidgeting beside her in their best clothes. Kai in the navy suit James had bought him for Easter, Kaya in a black dress that made her look far too grown up. Victoria Whitmore entered the room like she owned it, which she probably did through some web of old connections and older favors. Her heels clicked against marble floors with the precision of a metronome, each step announcing her presence. Harrison followed, checking his phone with the casual arrogance of a man who'd never doubted his place in the world. Neither acknowledged Amara beyond a curt nod. "Daddy would sit with us," Kaya whispered, pressing closer to her mother. "I know, baby." Amara's voice caught. James would have bridged this gap with his easy smile, his way of making everyone feel included. He would have made jokes until Victoria almost smiled, would have ruffled Harrison's perfectly styled hair until his brother laughed despite himself. But James wasn't here. Mr. Pemberton, a thin man with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, cleared his throat. "Shall we begin?" The will was straightforward, exactly as Harrison had predicted. Amara would receive a modest trust fund, enough to live comfortably, but not lavishly. The twins would have substantial trusts available when they turned 25. The Whitmore estate, the business interests, the investments, all would go to Victoria, then Harrison. The house, Amara began, then stopped. It wasn't really a question. "Will remain in the family, naturally," Victoria said, her voice crisp as winter air. "Though you're welcome to take anything personal that belonged to James. His books, his photographs, that sort of thing. That sort of thing. As if their life together could be reduced to a few boxes of memorabilia." Mr. Pemberton was still speaking, something about paperwork and transition periods, but Amara's attention drifted to a framed photograph on his desk. A family at the beach, children building sandcastles, while parents watched with obvious love. Simple. Uncomplicated. Everything her life with James had never been allowed to be. "Mrs. Williams?" Mr. Pemberton's voice brought her back. "Did you have any questions about the arrangements?" She looked at Victoria, at Harrison, at these people who shared her children's blood, but not their world. "How long do I have to vacate?" Victoria's eyebrows rose slightly. "Oh, there's no rush, my dear. A week or two should be sufficient." A week or two. To pack up 2 years of marriage, 5 years of the twins' lives, to somehow explain to 2 5-year-olds why they had to leave the only home they remembered. The townhouse Harrison found is lovely, Victoria continued, her tone suggesting the conversation was over. The children will adjust. They're young. Young. As if being young made abandonment easier to bear. The twins had been remarkably quiet during the reading, but now Kai spoke up, his small voice cutting through the adults' careful politeness. Are we going to live with Grandma Vicky? The silence stretched like a held breath. Victoria's composure flickered. Just for a moment, and Amara saw something that might have been pain cross her face. No, sweetheart, Victoria said finally, her voice softer than it had been all afternoon. You're going to live with Mommy in a new house. A nice house. But what about Daddy's room? What about his books? Kaya joined her brother's questions. What about the swing in the garden? What about Princess? Princess was their cat, a spoiled Persian that James had rescued from a shelter despite his mother's protests about proper breeding. Each question was a small knife, cutting deeper into the careful pretense that this was all reasonable, all for the best. The cat can come with you, of course, Victoria said quickly. Too quickly. And we'll visit. You'll visit us. But even as she spoke, Amara could hear the future in her voice. Awkward holidays, scheduled playdates, the gradual drift that distance and different worlds would bring. The twins would become visitors in what had been their home, guests in their own family. Harrison cleared his throat. Perhaps we should discuss the practical arrangements. Moving companies, that sort of thing. I can pack our things, Amara said quietly. Nonsense. Victoria's mask of courtesy slipped back into place. We'll have people handle it. More efficient, and more controlled. Strangers would touch their belongings, decide what was worth keeping and what could be discarded. James's presence would be erased by people who'd never known his laugh, never heard him sing off-key lullabies to his children. The meeting ended with handshakes and promises to stay in touch. Walking to her car, James's car, actually, another thing that would need to be returned, Amara felt the full weight of her new reality settling around her shoulders like a heavy coat. The twins climbed into their car seats, unusually subdued. Mommy. Kaya's voice was small. Did we do something bad? The question broke something inside Amara's chest. She turned in her seat to face her children. James's eyes looking back at her from their small faces, his stubborn chin, his quick mind already working to understand a situation that made no sense. No, baby girl. You didn't do anything bad. You could never do anything bad enough for this. Then why don't they want us anymore? Amara closed her eyes, searching for words that could explain prejudice to children who'd only known love. How do you tell 5-year-olds that some people believe their worth is determined by the color of their skin, the texture of their hair, the complicated math of their bloodline? Sometimes, she said finally, people get scared when they're sad. And scared people don't always make good choices. It wasn't the truth, not the whole truth, but it was all she had. Driving away from the law offices, Amara caught sight of Victoria's Bentley in her rear-view mirror. Through the rear window, she could see the older woman's silhouette, rigid and unmoving. For just a moment, she wondered if Victoria was watching them leave, if some part of her questioned what she was doing. But the moment passed, and the Bentley turned left toward the estate, while Amara drove straight toward an uncertain future, carrying her children toward a world where they would have to learn to belong all over again. How do you think the twins will cope with this sudden upheaval? What would you want to tell them if you could? Let me know in the comments. Sometimes the wisdom of community can help us process these difficult moments. Before we continue the story, kindly make sure you have clicked on the subscribe button. This motivates me to bring you more beautiful stories like this. Now let's continue. The Riverside Motel smelled like industrial disinfectant and broken dreams. Amara sat on the edge of a bed that sagged in the middle, watching her twins sleep in the other bed, their small bodies curled together for comfort. 3 days had passed since the will reading, 3 days since their world had shifted on its axis. She'd packed what she could fit into her car: clothes, toys, a few photo albums Victoria had graciously allowed her to keep. Everything else remained in that marble mausoleum, being sorted by strangers who measured worth in dollars rather than memories. The townhouse Harrison had found wouldn't be available for another week. A minor delay with the previous tenant, he'd explained over the phone, his voice carrying the particular indifference of someone for whom homelessness was merely an inconvenience to be managed. So here they were, the widow and children of James Whitmore III, sleeping in a roadside motel where the ice machine hummed like a dying animal, and the walls were thin enough to hear every fight, every sob, every desperate phone call from the other lost souls seeking temporary shelter. Amara's phone buzzed with a text from her best friend Maya. Asterisk, how are you holding up? Need anything? Asterisk. How was she holding up? She was 28 years old, suddenly single, staying in a motel with her children, while her in-laws erased her existence from their family tree. She was holding up the way anyone holds up when the ground beneath them has cracked open. Barely, and only through sheer force of will. We're fine, she texted back. Just temporary. Another lie. They were collecting like autumn leaves. Kai stirred in his sleep, reaching for his sister instinctively. Even unconscious, they sought each other for comfort. It broke Amara's heart. These children who'd known security their entire lives now clinging to each other in a strange room that smelled like other people's desperation. She pulled out her laptop, the one luxury she'd insisted on keeping, and opened her email. Dozens of condolence messages from friends, colleagues from the social services program she'd been completing before James got sick. Everyone wanted to help, but what help was there for a situation like this? Sympathy couldn't pay for a hotel room. Good intentions couldn't bridge the gap between her old life and whatever came next. Her phone rang. Victoria's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment, just a moment, Amara felt a flicker of hope. Maybe the older woman had reconsidered. Maybe she'd realized that family was more than bloodline. Amara. Victoria's voice was crisp, businesslike. I wanted to check on your progress with the move. We're managing, Amara said carefully. Good. I've been going through James's things, and I found some items that belong to the children. Their artwork, some toys they'd left in his study. Should I send them to the townhouse? Their artwork. Finger paintings that James had insisted on framing, crayon drawings of stick-figure families that he'd kept in his desk drawer like precious documents. Victoria spoke of them like inventory to be distributed. That would be nice, Amara managed. There's also the matter of James's books. So many of them, and I know he was particular about his collection. I thought perhaps you might want some? The children's books, certainly, and maybe some of his favorites. The offer was generous, by Victoria's standards. It was also a clear message. Take what we give you, and be grateful for the crumbs. Yes, please. James loved his books. He did. For just a moment, Victoria's voice softened. He read to those children every night, didn't he? Even when he was exhausted from work. Every night, Amara confirmed, remembering James sprawled across the twins' beds, doing different voices for different characters until Kai and Kaya dissolved into giggles. The silence stretched between them, filled with everything they weren't saying. Then Victoria's voice returned to its careful neutrality. Well, I should let you rest. Moving is so exhausting. After she hung up, Amara stared at her phone for a long time. There had been something in Victoria's voice when she spoke of James reading to the children. A crack in the careful composure, a glimpse of the grandmother who might have been if fear and prejudice hadn't built walls around her heart. But glimpses weren't enough. Cracks didn't heal rifts. 15 miles away, Victoria Whitmore sat in her late son's study, surrounded by the detritus of a life cut short. Books everywhere, philosophy texts mixed with children's picture books, legal journals stacked beside fantasy novels. James had never met a book he didn't want to befriend, a trait that had driven his more practical father to distraction. She picked up a well-worn copy of Where the Crawdads Sing, James's handwriting in the margins. Amara would love this, he'd written on page 47. Story of belonging despite everything. Victoria closed the book quickly, as if his words could burn her fingers. This was necessary, she told herself. Difficult, but necessary. Amara was young. She would find her way. The children would adapt. Children always did. And the family would heal from this disruption, would return to the natural order of things. But if this was right, why did everything feel so wrong? She moved to James's desk, where a framed photo showed him with Amara and the twins at last Christmas. He was wearing a ridiculous reindeer sweater, Amara's idea, no doubt, and his smile was so genuine, so completely happy, that Victoria had to look away. Harrison appeared in the doorway, surveying the organized chaos of their sorting efforts. How are you managing, Mother? Fine. The word came out sharper than intended. This is just, there's so much. We could hire someone to finish this. No. Victoria's response was immediate. No, I need to do this myself. She needed to touch each book, each photograph, each remnant of her son's choices. She needed to decide what mattered and what could be discarded. It was her penance, her way of taking responsibility for decisions that felt increasingly hollow as the hours passed. Any word on how they're settling in? Harrison asked casually. They're fine. Another lie, but this one felt necessary. Harrison had orchestrated this transition with the efficiency of a corporate restructuring, and any suggestion that it wasn't working perfectly would only complicate things further. Good. It's better this way, you know. Cleaner. Cleaner. As if their family were a spill to be mopped up, a stain to be removed. After Harrison left, Victoria returned to the photograph on James's desk. 4 faces smiling at the camera, unaware that it would be their last Christmas together. She traced her son's face with one finger, remembering when he was small, when he would climb into her lap and demand stories, when loving him was simple and uncomplicated. When had it become so hard? When had protecting him started to mean pushing away the people he loved? The questions followed her through the empty house, echoing in marble hallways that suddenly felt less like a home and more like a beautiful mausoleum. A place where love had once lived, but now only memory remained. The call came at 2:17 p.m. on a Tuesday that had already tested every reserve of strength Amara possessed. She was sitting in the cramped kitchenette of their new townhouse, finally available after 2 weeks in the motel, trying to make mac and cheese feel like a celebration meal when her phone rang. Mrs. Williams? This is Principal Morrison from Riverside Elementary. I'm afraid there's been an incident with Kai and Kaya. Amara's blood turned to ice water. What kind of incident? Nothing serious, the principal assured her quickly. But there was a disagreement on the playground. Some harsh words were exchanged. I think it would be best if you came in. 20 minutes later, Amara sat in Principal Morrison's office, looking at her twins' tear-stained faces and trying to piece together what had happened. Kai's knuckles were scraped, Kaya's dress was dirty, and both children wore the particular mixture of defiance and shame that came with playground justice. They were defending each other, Principal Morrison explained gently. Some older children made comments about their family situation. Called them names. What names? Amara's voice was dangerously quiet. Mommy, Kaya interrupted. They said we don't have a real family anymore. They said our daddy's family doesn't want us because we're different, Kai finished, his small fist still clenched. Before Amara could respond, there was a knock on the office door. Principal Morrison frowned. Clearly, this wasn't expected. The door opened, and Victoria Whitmore stepped into the small office like she'd entered a foreign country, her designer coat and pearl necklace suddenly seeming absurdly formal in the elementary school setting. I came as soon as I heard, she said, her eyes immediately finding the twins. Grandma Vicky. Despite everything, Kaya launched herself from her chair toward Victoria. The older woman caught her instinctively, her composed mask slipping as small arms wrapped around her waist. Kai hung back, watching his sister with the careful assessment of a child learning that love could be conditional. How did you? Amara began. I'm still listed as an emergency contact, Victoria said, settling into the remaining chair with Kaya still pressed against her side. The school called me when they couldn't reach you immediately. Principal Morrison looked between the two women, clearly sensing undercurrents she didn't understand. Perhaps we should focus on the children? What exactly happened? Victoria asked, and her voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to getting answers. The story came out in pieces. The twins had been playing during recess when a group of older children, kids who'd heard their parents talking, who'd absorbed adult prejudices without understanding their weight, had cornered them by the swings. They said our grandma didn't want us anymore, Kai explained, his voice barely above a whisper. They said that's why we had to move away. Victoria went very still. What else did they say? Bad words, Kaya mumbled into Victoria's coat. About Mommy. About us. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. When Victoria spoke again, her voice carried the glacial fury of old money protecting its own. I want the names of these children. Mrs. Whitmore, Principal Morrison began diplomatically. We prefer to handle these situations with education rather than punishment. You will handle this situation by ensuring it never happens again, Victoria interrupted, and suddenly Amara understood how the Whitmore family had built their empire. These are my grandchildren. They will be treated with respect, or there will be consequences. For a moment, Amara felt a surge of gratitude, so strong it nearly knocked her breathless. This was the Victoria she'd glimpsed occasionally during her marriage to James, the fierce matriarch who would burn the world down to protect what was hers. But then reality reasserted itself. The twins might be Victoria's grandchildren, but they were inconvenient grandchildren, protected when threatened by outsiders, but still not truly welcomed home. After Principal Morrison assured them the situation would be addressed, they found themselves walking toward the parking lot together, an awkward foursome trying to navigate new dynamics. Can we ride with Grandma Vicky? Kaya asked hopefully. You came with Mommy, Amara said gently. We should go back with Mommy. But I miss Grandma Vicky's car. It smells like flowers. Victoria's Bentley did smell like flowers. Expensive perfume and leather conditioner, and the particular scent of money that never worries about next month's rent. Amara's Honda smelled like French fries and childhood, and the stressed sweat of a single mother trying to hold everything together. Perhaps, Victoria began, then stopped. Whatever she'd been about to say required more courage than she possessed in that moment. The children could visit this weekend, she said instead. If you're amenable. Saturday afternoon, perhaps. Just for a few hours. It was an olive branch, or maybe just guilt. Either way, it was more than Amara had expected. They'd like that, she said carefully. As they reached their respective cars, Kai spoke up. Grandma Vicky, are you ashamed of us? The question hung in the autumn air like a visible thing. Victoria knelt down, bringing herself to Kai's eye level, her expensive coat pooling on the asphalt. Never, she said, and her voice broke just slightly. I could never be ashamed of you. Then why can't we come home?
It was the question Victoria had been avoiding, the one that cut to the heart of everything. Amara watched the older woman's face, seeing the war between love and fear, between what she felt and what she believed was right. Sometimes, Victoria said finally, adults make things more complicated than they need to be. Sometimes we let fear make our choices instead of love. It wasn't a real answer, but it was more honesty than Victoria had offered since James died. Driving home, Amara found herself thinking about the woman who'd knelt on school pavement to comfort her grandchildren, who'd faced down a principal with the fury of a protecting grandmother. That woman loved Kai and Kaya. It was written in every line of her face, every instinctive gesture. But love, as Amara was learning, wasn't always enough to overcome fear. And fear, once it took root, grew like weeds in even the richest soil. Mommy, Kaya asked from the back seat. Is Grandma Vicky scared of us? No, baby girl. She's scared of herself. It was the truest thing Amara had said in weeks. The letter arrived on a Thursday morning, wedged between a credit card offer and a grocery store circular. Amara almost missed it. The envelope was cream-colored, expensive, with her name written in unfamiliar handwriting. No return address, but something about the weight of it, the quality of the paper, suggested importance. Inside was a single sheet of letterhead from Blackstone and Associates, private attorneys, and a smaller, sealed envelope marked personal, for Amara Williams only. The cover letter was brief. Mrs. Williams, we represent the estate of Eleanor Blackstone. Per her final instructions, this correspondence was to be delivered 6 weeks after your husband's passing. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience. Eleanor Blackstone. The name meant nothing to Amara, but the timing was oddly specific. She tore open the smaller envelope with trembling fingers. My dear Amara, if you're reading this, then James is gone, and I imagine you're discovering what I learned 50 years ago, that the Whitmore family protects their own version of respectability above all else. I pray I'm wrong, but I suspect you and those precious children have been made to feel unwelcome. I am Eleanor Blackstone. Perhaps James mentioned me? I was Eleanor Whitmore once, married to Victoria's brother-in-law Robert. I know something about being the wrong woman in that family. If my assumptions about your situation are correct, then it's time you knew the truth about your inheritance. James wasn't the only one who loved you, child. Ask them about the Blackstone Trust. Ask them why your husband's grandfather left specific provisions for the woman who would finally teach this family about love. The lawyers have the details. All you need to know is this. You are not powerless, and you are not alone. With love and hope. Eleanor Blackstone. Amara read the letter 3 times before the words fully penetrated. An inheritance? From someone she'd never met? And why would James's grandfather leave money for a woman he'd never known? Her phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Coffee later? You sound like you need it. Actually, can you watch the twins for an hour? Something's come up. An hour later, Amara sat in the plush offices of Blackstone and Associates, learning about a life she'd never known existed. The lawyer, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a sharp suit, spread documents across a mahogany table. Eleanor Blackstone was quite specific about the timing, she explained. She wanted you to experience the Whitmore family's traditional response to outsiders before learning about your options. What options? The lawyer smiled. Mrs. Williams, you are the sole beneficiary of a trust fund established in 1987 by Harrison Whitmore Sr., James's grandfather. The current value is approximately $103 million. The words hit Amara like a physical blow. She gripped the arms of her chair, certain she'd misheard. I'm sorry, what? $103 million, give or take market fluctuations. Harrison Sr. established the trust after his own daughter-in-law, Eleanor, was effectively exiled from the family when his son died. He was regretful about how she was treated. The room spun slightly. But why me? He died before I ever met James. Ah, but he was very specific about the conditions. The lawyer pulled out another document. The trust was to go to the woman who would marry his grandson James for love, not money, and who would show this family that worth isn't measured in bloodline, but in heart. Eleanor Blackstone was appointed as the trustee to determine when those conditions were met. She never even met me. Actually, she did. Several times. She came to your wedding, a small woman in a blue dress who left early. She attended Kai and Kaya's birthday parties, always staying in the background. She observed the way you loved James, the way you raised those children, the way you tried to bridge the gap between your world and theirs.
Amara's mind raced back through memories, searching for a face that might belong to this mysterious guardian angel. A woman in blue at the wedding. Yes, she remembered. James had mentioned an elderly family friend, someone he was glad could make it despite her age. The trust comes with one condition, the lawyer continued. You must claim it in person, at the Whitmore estate, in the presence of the current family members. Eleanor felt it was important that they understand what they'd given up when they chose prejudice over love. That evening, the twins were having their promised visit with Victoria. Amara used the quiet to call Maya and try to process the impossible reality of her situation. Wait, let me get this straight, Maya said over the phone. You're secretly a millionaire? Like 100 times over millionaire? Apparently. And the family that kicked you out doesn't know? Not a clue. Oh honey, this is about to get very interesting. Later, alone in the townhouse that now felt absurdly small, Amara thought about Eleanor Blackstone, a woman she'd never truly met, but who'd spent years protecting her from the shadows. What must it have been like to be exiled from the Whitmore family 50 years ago? To watch history repeat itself with a new generation? And James, had he known? She thought about his grandfather, the man who died when James was in college. James had always spoken of him fondly, describing him as different from the rest of the family, more open-minded, more interested in people than pedigree. The front door opened, and Victoria's voice carried through the house. "Careful with your backpacks, children." Amara came downstairs to find Victoria, helping the twins with their coats. Her movements gentle and natural in a way that suggested this could be routine if they let it. "How did they do?" Amara asked. "Wonderfully. We read stories, and Kaya helped me make cookies." Victoria's smile was soft, unguarded. "They're remarkable children, Amara. James would be so proud." For a moment, looking at this grandmother with flour still dusting her expensive blouse, Amara felt the weight of the secret knowledge pressing against her chest. Victoria loved these children. It was written in every careful gesture, every gentle word. But love hadn't been enough to overcome a lifetime of conditioning. "Victoria," Amara said impulsively, "did you know Eleanor Blackstone well?" Victoria went very still, her hand frozen on Kaya's zipper. "Why do you ask?" "I received a letter. From her attorney." "Eleanor died 6 months ago," Victoria said carefully. "I thought perhaps she might have left the children something small. A memento." She was lying, or at least not telling the whole truth. Amara could see it in the way Victoria's shoulders tensed, in the careful neutrality of her voice. "She left more than a memento," Amara said quietly. Victoria met her eyes, and for a moment something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, or the beginning of understanding that the game was about to change entirely. "We should discuss this," Victoria said finally, "when the children aren't listening." But before they could arrange anything, Kai spoke up with the devastating honesty of a 5-year-old. "Grandma Vicky, why do grown-ups make everything so hard?" Neither woman had an answer for that. "Have you ever discovered something about your family's past that changed how you saw the present? Sometimes the most important truths are the ones kept hidden until we're ready to handle them." What do you think Amara should do with this life-changing information? Let me know your thoughts below. The call came at midnight, Victoria's voice tight with controlled panic, asking if Amara could come to the estate immediately. Kaya had spiked a high fever during her sleepover visit, and Victoria couldn't get her temperature down. 20 minutes later, Amara found herself back in the Whitmore mansion for the first time since the funeral, running up marble stairs she'd never thought she'd climb again. She found Victoria in the guest room. Asterisk the children's room asterisk, she corrected herself, holding a burning Kaya, while Kai slept restlessly in the twin bed nearby. She was fine at bedtime, Victoria said, her usual composure cracked with worry. Then she woke up crying so hot. "I called our family doctor, but—" "You did good," Amara interrupted, taking her daughter from Victoria's arms. Kaya was indeed burning with fever, but not dangerously so. "It's probably just a bug from school. Has she had any medicine?" "Children's Tylenol, about an hour ago. I wasn't sure about the dosage. I kept thinking James would know what to do." The admission hung in the air between them. This powerful woman reduced to helplessness by a sick child, missing her son with the particular ache of a mother who could no longer protect him or ask his advice. "You did exactly right," Amara said gently. "The fever should break soon." For the next 3 hours, they took turns sitting with Kaya, Victoria bringing cool washcloths while Amara monitored her temperature, both women moving around each other with the careful choreography of shared concern. By 3 a.m., the fever had broken, and Kaya was sleeping peacefully. Kai had slept through most of it, but now he stirred, reaching instinctively for his sister. Finding her bed empty, he sat up with the instant alertness of a child accustomed to disruption. "Mommy? Is Kaya okay?" "She's fine, baby. Just a little fever." Victoria had been quietly gathering up damp washcloths, but she paused. "Would you like some tea?" "I was going to make some for myself." It was past 3 a.m. They were both exhausted, and the offer was so unexpectedly domestic that Amara found herself nodding. That would be nice. The kitchen was different at night. Softer somehow, less imposing. Victoria moved through it with the ease of someone who'd spent years making late-night cups of tea for sick children, worried about fevers and bad dreams, and all the small crises that parenthood brings. James had terrible ear infections as a baby, she said, setting delicate china cups on the marble counter. I spent months sleeping in a chair beside his crib, certain that if I left him alone, something would happen. Kai was the same way. I used to joke that he was allergic to sleep. And now look at him, he could sleep through an earthquake. Victoria's smile was soft, unguarded. They're so much like James was at that age. The way Kaya tilts her head when she's thinking. The way Kai gets that little crease between his eyebrows when he's concentrating. They carried their tea to the small breakfast nook. A cozy corner that felt more like a real kitchen than the formal spaces Amara remembered from her marriage. Outside the windows, the estate gardens were silver in the moonlight. I owe you an apology, Victoria said suddenly. Amara's teacup paused halfway to her lips. For what? For everything. For the way I've handled this whole situation. For making you feel unwelcome when you were grieving. For making those children think they weren't wanted. Victoria's voice was steady, but her hands shook slightly around her cup. I've been so focused on protecting what I thought was important that I lost sight of what actually mattered. You were protecting your family. No, I was protecting my idea of what family should look like. There's a difference. Victoria set down her cup and really looked at Amara. Not the careful assessment she'd done for 2 years of marriage, but the honest look of one mother recognizing another. You know, when James first brought you home, I was terrified. Of me. Of what you represented. Change. The end of things I thought were permanent. Victoria's laugh was rueful. I spent 60 years believing that breeding and bloodline were what mattered, that maintaining tradition was the same thing as maintaining worth. And then James brought home this beautiful, intelligent woman who loved him completely. Not his money, not his name, just him. And suddenly all my certainties felt fragile. Amara set down her own cup. I never wanted to replace anything. I just wanted to belong. I know that now. I think I knew it then, if I'm honest. But knowing something and accepting it are different things. Victoria was quiet for a moment then. Tell me about Eleanor's letter. So Amara told her. About the trust fund, about Harrison Sr.'s conditions, about Eleanor watching from the shadows and waiting to see if love would win over prejudice. Victoria listened without interrupting, her face cycling through surprise, recognition, and something that might have been relief. 100 million, she said finally. Give or take. And you have to claim it here, in front of the family. According to Eleanor's instructions, yes. Victoria was quiet for a long time, staring out at the gardens where James used to play as a child. My father-in-law was a complicated man, traditional in many ways, but he had a streak of justice that sometimes surprised people. When we failed her so completely after Robert died, he was devastated. He tried to reach out to her, but she'd moved away, changed her name. I think the guilt ate at him. So he set up the trust. Insurance, maybe. A way to ensure that if this family made the same mistake again, there would be consequences. And rewards for the woman who deserved better. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. 2 women who'd spent 2 years circling each other warily, now finding common ground in their shared love for the sleeping children upstairs. What will you do? Victoria asked finally. I don't know. The money would change everything for the twins. Their education, their opportunities. Amara trailed off. But claiming it the way Eleanor wants, it feels like revenge. Maybe that's what this family needs. A reckoning. Is it what you need? Victoria considered this carefully. What I need is to be a better grandmother than I've been. What I need is to stop letting fear make my choices. She met Amara's eyes. What I need is for you and those children to forgive an old woman who forgot that love is braver than tradition. Upstairs, a small voice called out. Mommy? Grandma Vicky. They found Kaya sitting up in bed, fever-free, but confused by the unfamiliar room. Kai was awake too, both children reaching for the comfort of familiar voices. We're here, Victoria said, settling on the edge of Kaya's bed while Amara sat beside Kai. "We're both here. Are you staying, Mommy?" Kaya asked. "Tonight, yes. Are we staying tomorrow too?" Amara looked at Victoria, seeing hope and fear warring in the older woman's face. "Would you like to stay tomorrow too?" Both children nodded eagerly. "Then we'll stay," Amara said. "As long as Grandma Vicky wants us." "Forever," Victoria whispered, so quietly that only Amara heard. "I want you forever." Sometimes healing happens in the quiet moments, over cups of tea, in shared worry, through simple acts of care. What do you think it takes for families to heal from deep wounds? Have you ever experienced that moment when understanding finally breaks through? Share your thoughts on what true forgiveness looks like. The morning after felt like borrowed time, too perfect to last. Amara woke in the guest room that had once been hers and James's, finding Victoria already downstairs making pancakes while the twins sat at the kitchen island, still in their pajamas, chattering about their dreams. It was almost possible to pretend that the last 2 months hadn't happened, that this was just another lazy Saturday morning in the life they'd once shared. Almost. The illusion shattered when Harrison walked through the front door without knocking, his face thunderous as he took in the domestic scene before him. "Mother, what is this?" Victoria didn't look up from the griddle. "Good morning, Harrison. Would you like some coffee?" "I'd like an explanation. The staff said Amara's car was here all night. Kaya had a fever. Amara came to help. And stayed the night." Harrison's tone could have cut glass. "In her former bedroom, I assume?" The twins went quiet, sensing the tension that had suddenly filled the room like smoke. Amara stood slowly, positioning herself between Harrison and her children. "The children needed their mother," Victoria said, her voice carrying a warning. "The children have a perfectly adequate home with their mother. That was the entire point of this arrangement." Harrison poured himself coffee with sharp, angry movements. "Or have you forgotten that we spent considerable effort establishing appropriate boundaries?" "Boundaries?" Amara found her voice. "Is that what we're calling abandonment now?" Harrison turned to face her fully, and she saw something ugly flicker across his features. The particular disdain of a man who'd never questioned his right to make decisions about other people's lives. "You were provided for generously. A home, financial support, educational funds for the children. Most women in your situation would be grateful." "My situation?" The words were ice cold. "Harrison." Victoria's voice was sharp now, truly warning. "That's enough." But Harrison was past caution, past the careful politeness that had masked his true feelings for 2 years. "My situation is what, exactly? A widow? A single mother? Or something else you're too polite to say out loud?" As a woman who married into a family and expected that marriage to be a permanent ticket to a lifestyle she couldn't afford on her own. The accusation hung in the air like a slap. Kai and Kaya had gone completely still, their small faces reflecting confusion and growing distress. Victoria stepped between them, her face pale with fury. "You will not speak to her that way in this house. This is still my house too, Mother. And I won't stand by while you're manipulated by." "By what?" Amara's voice had gone dangerously quiet. "Say it, Harrison. Say what you really think. I think you saw an opportunity when you met James. I think you played on his good nature and his guilt about privilege. I think you produced those children to secure your place in this family, and now that he's gone, you're using them to manipulate Mother's emotions." The words hit like physical blows. Amara felt something cold and final settle in her chest. Not hurt, exactly, but a crystalline clarity about exactly where she stood in this family's hierarchy. "Is that what you think?" she asked Victoria. "That I manipulated James? That I had children to secure my place?" Victoria looked stricken. "Of course not. Amara, you have to know." "Do I?" Amara's voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. "Because 2 months ago, you threw me out of this house without a second thought. 2 months ago, you decided that my grief didn't matter, that my children's security didn't matter, that the life we'd built here was disposable." "I was wrong," Victoria said desperately. "Last night, this morning, I thought we were moving past that. One night doesn't erase 2 months of rejection. One fever doesn't undo the damage of making your own grandchildren feel unwanted. Amara was gathering steam now, months of suppressed anger finally finding its voice. And it certainly doesn't change the fact that when it mattered most, you chose him, she gestured at Harrison, and his prejudices over me and my children. That's not. Mommy, why is Uncle Harry being mean? Kaya's small voice cut through the adult fury, reminding them all that 2 5-year-olds were absorbing every word, every inflection of hatred and rejection. Harrison looked at his niece, really looked at her for the first time, and something flickered across his face. Doubt, maybe, or the first stirring of shame. But it was too little, too late. Come on, babies, Amara said, her voice gentle despite the rage coursing through her veins. Let's get dressed. We're going home. But Mommy, Kai protested. Grandma Vicky said we could stay today. Plans change, sweetheart. Sometimes people say things they don't really mean. Victoria flinched as if she'd been struck. Amara, please. Don't punish the children because of. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm protecting them. Amara's eyes were blazing now. I'm protecting them from growing up thinking that love is conditional, that belonging depends on other people's approval, that they have to prove their worth to family members who should love them unconditionally. She turned to Harrison, and when she spoke, her voice carried the full weight of 2 years of slights, 2 months of exile, and a lifetime of fighting for space in rooms that didn't want her. You want to know what I think, Harrison? I think you're terrified that those children upstairs are the future of this family. I think you're scared that their brown skin and beautiful hair and perfect hearts represent everything your narrow little world is too frightened to embrace. I think you look at them and see the end of your version of the Whitmore legacy, and it makes you feel small and obsolete. Harrison's face had gone red, then white. How dare you? How dare I what? Tell the truth? Point out that your nephews and niece are smart and beautiful and worthy of love regardless of their skin color? How dare I suggest that this family's legacy might actually be improved by including people who know what it means to fight for their place in the world? She was magnificent in her fury, a lioness protecting her cubs, a woman who'd finally stopped trying to make herself smaller to fit into spaces that were never designed for her. 30 seconds, she told the twins. Get your backpacks. We're leaving. As she herded her children toward the stairs, Victoria caught her arm. The trust fund, she said quietly. Eleanor's trust. You'll claim it. Amara looked at this woman who'd shown her such tenderness the night before, such promise of acceptance, only to stand by while her son revealed the ugly truth that still lived beneath the surface of this family's civility. Yes, she said simply. I'll claim it. Every penny. And then you'll never have to worry about me manipulating your family again. The drive home was silent, except for Kaya's quiet sniffles. In the rearview mirror, Amara could see the Whitmore estate growing smaller, its windows glinting in the morning sun, like eyes that had seen too much and forgiven too little. The law offices of Blackstone and Associates had been transformed into a stage for what Eleanor Blackstone had clearly intended as theater. The main conference room held a massive table surrounded by leather chairs, with copies of legal documents stacked precisely at each place setting. Amara sat at one end, wearing the black dress she'd worn to James's funeral, armor disguised as morning wear. Victoria entered first, her usual composure intact, but something fragile around her eyes. Harrison followed, his jaw set in the particular way of a man preparing for battle. Behind them came the family lawyer, Mr. Pemberton, looking distinctly uncomfortable with the entire arrangement. Before we begin, the Blackstone attorney said, I want to read Eleanor's specific instructions for this meeting. She cleared her throat and began. If you are hearing this, then the Whitmore family has once again chosen prejudice over love, tradition over heart. The woman sitting before you, Amara Williams, is worth more than this entire family combined, and not because of the money I'm about to give her. She is worth more because she loved James without condition, because she raised those children with grace, and because she tried to build bridges while you built walls. Harrison shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Victoria stared at her hands. The trust established by Harrison Whitmore Sr. in 1987 was his attempt to atone for our family's treatment of me after my Robert died. He hoped his descendants would learn from his mistakes. Clearly, they have not. The lawyer set down the letter and picked up another document. The Harrison Whitmore Sr. Memorial Trust, established with an initial investment of $12 million in 1987, has grown to a current value of $103,412,000. Mrs. Williams, this inheritance is yours without condition, restriction, or requirement to share with the Whitmore family. The silence in the room was deafening. However, the lawyer continued, Eleanor Blackstone has added one final stipulation. Before the trust can be claimed, each party present must make a choice. She turned to Victoria first. Mrs. Whitmore, you must choose between maintaining your current stance, that your son's widow and children are not truly part of this family, or publicly acknowledging that your prejudices have cost you the relationship with your grandchildren. If you choose the former, Mrs. Williams claims the trust, and you forfeit any legal right to contact with Kai and Kaya Williams. Victoria's face went ashen. You can't, that's not legal. It is actually. Mrs. Williams has been documenting the emotional abuse and rejection. A family court would be very interested in grandparents who throw grieving children out of their homes based on racial bias. The lawyer turned to Harrison. Mr. Whitmore, you must choose between your stated belief that Mrs. Williams is a manipulative gold digger who used your brother for financial gain, or admit that your treatment of her has been based on racial prejudice and that you've caused harm to innocent children. Choose the former, and you're banned from any contact with your nephew and niece. Choose the latter, and you begin the long process of earning their forgiveness. Harrison's face had gone from red to purple. This is extortion. No. Amara spoke for the first time, her voice steady and clear. This is accountability. The lawyer placed a final document before Amara. And you, Mrs. Williams, must choose between claiming this inheritance and walking away from the Whitmore family forever, which would be completely justified, or using Eleanor's gift to give this family one final chance to choose love over fear. Amara looked around the table at these people who had shaped her husband's life, who shared her children's DNA, who had made her feel like an intruder in her own marriage. I need to tell you all something, she said quietly. The night Kaya had her fever, when Victoria and I sat in that kitchen drinking tea, I saw a glimpse of the grandmother my children deserved. I saw a woman capable of love, capable of growth, capable of putting children before pride. Victoria's hands trembled as she reached for her water glass. But then the next morning, when Harrison showed his true feelings, Victoria said nothing. She stood by and let him call me a manipulator, let him suggest that my children were some kind of scheme. And in that silence, I heard the answer to every question I'd had about whether I truly belonged in this family. Harrison started to speak, but Amara held up her hand. I'm not finished. You see, I spent 2 years trying to shrink myself to fit into your world. I spoke more quietly, dressed more conservatively, tried to anticipate your disapproval before it could form. I taught my children to be grateful for scraps of attention from their own family. I accepted crumbs when I deserved a feast. She stood, walking to the window that overlooked the city where she'd been building a new life. But Eleanor's gift isn't just money. It's validation. It's proof that someone saw my worth when I couldn't see it myself. It's confirmation that James's grandfather, a man who barely knew me, understood that love matters more than bloodline. She turned back to face them. Victoria, I know you love Kai and Kaya. I saw it in every gentle gesture, every careful attention to their needs. But love that comes with conditions isn't love, it's control. Love that disappears when things get complicated isn't love, it's convenience. Victoria's composed mask finally cracked. I was scared, she whispered. When James died, I was terrified of losing everything. Him, you, the children, the future I'd imagined. I thought if I could control the situation, maybe the pain would be manageable. And you, Harrison. Amara's voice was gentler now, but no less firm. I don't think you're evil. I think you're small. I think you've lived your entire life in a bubble where your comfort mattered more than other people's humanity. James used to talk about how you were when you were kids, how you'd share your toys, how you'd protect him from bullies. That person is still in there somewhere. Harrison was staring at the table, his shoulders bent with something that might have been shame. "So here's my choice," Amara announced. "I'm claiming the inheritance. Every penny. Because Eleanor was right. I deserve it, my children deserve it, and this family deserves to face the consequences of their choices." Victoria made a sound like a wounded animal. "But," Amara continued, "I'm also giving this family 6 months to prove that people can change. 6 months for you to show me, not with words, but with actions, that you understand what you've done, and that you're willing to do the work to earn your way back into our lives." She gathered her purse, preparing to leave. "The children and I are moving to California. I've been accepted into a doctorate program at Stanford, social work, focusing on family trauma and healing. We'll be gone by Christmas." "California." Victoria's voice broke on the word. 3,000 miles away from people who make my children question their worth. But the door isn't locked forever. It's just closed until you prove it's safe to open it again. As she reached the conference room door, she turned back one final time. James used to say that love was the only thing that mattered. He was right. But he was wrong about one thing. Love isn't enough if it doesn't come with respect, acceptance, and the willingness to fight for what's right. 6 months later, Stanford University campus, California. The cherry blossoms were in full bloom along the campus walkway, their pink petals dancing in the warm April breeze. Amara sat on a bench outside the Graduate School of Social Work, reviewing her thesis notes on intergenerational trauma and healing, while waiting for the twins to finish their after-school program. California had been everything she'd hoped. Sunshine that felt like possibility, a community that welcomed her children without question, professors who valued her insights about family dynamics and systemic discrimination. The inheritance had bought them more than financial security. It had purchased freedom from the weight of other people's expectations. Kai and Kaya had thrived in their new environment. Their laughter came easier now, their questions were bolder, their sense of belonging unshakable. They spoke of their father with love and their new life with excitement, and only occasionally asked about Grandma Vicky with the particular wistfulness of children who remember being loved, even imperfectly. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Package delivery at your apartment. Big one. East Coast postmark." Amara's heart did something complicated in her chest. For 6 months, there had been silence from Georgia. No calls, no letters, no attempts at contact beyond the monthly reports from the family lawyer confirming that her conditions remained unmet. She'd begun to accept that Victoria and Harrison had chosen pride over reconciliation. But a package suggested something different. An hour later, she stood in her bright apartment living room, so different from the marble coldness of the Whitmore estate, staring at a large box marked fragile and personal delivery. Inside, carefully wrapped in tissue paper, were James's books. All of them. The philosophy texts with his margin notes, the children's books he'd read aloud in different voices, the poetry collections he'd quoted when he wanted to make her laugh. Each one had a small note attached in Victoria's careful handwriting. "He read this to you on your first anniversary. His favorite when he was Kai's age. He bought this the day Kaya was born." At the bottom of the box was a leather-bound journal she'd never seen before, wrapped in a larger envelope. The journal was James's, his handwriting unmistakable on every page. But these weren't the careful legal briefs or business notes she remembered. These were letters. Letters to her, to the twins, to the future he'd hoped they would have together. "My dearest Amara, if you're reading this, then I'm gone and you're facing my family alone. I'm so sorry. I should have been braver when I was alive, should have stood up to their subtle racism, their quiet disapproval. I told myself that time would change their hearts, that love would eventually win over prejudice. I was naive. I want you to know that you were never the problem. Your beautiful mind, your generous heart, your strength in the face of their coldness. You were everything good in my world. If they cannot see that, it's their blindness, not your failing. The children will ask questions about belonging, about worth, about why some people treat them differently. Tell them this. They are perfect exactly as they are. Their brown skin is beautiful. Their mixed heritage is a gift. Their very existence proves that love can triumph over tradition. They are the future of this family, whether the family is wise enough to see it or not. I love you. I love our babies. And I believe that someday, my family will find their way to loving you the way you deserve to be loved. Always yours, James. The envelope contained a letter in Victoria's handwriting, dated 1 week ago. My dear Amora, I have read James's words to you 100 times. Each time, I am more ashamed of the woman I was and more determined to become the woman my son believed I could be. You asked for 6 months of actions, not words. Here is what I have done. I have attended counseling sessions, specifically focused on racial bias and grief counseling. I have learned that my fear of losing James made me push away everyone he loved, as if controlling our world could control our pain. I have volunteered at a community center in Atlanta that serves families like yours, single mothers, mixed-race children, people building beautiful lives despite systemic challenges. I wanted to understand the world you navigate daily, the strength it requires, the grace you showed us that we didn't deserve. Harrison has also been doing work, different work, but work nonetheless. He has joined a program for executives learning to address workplace discrimination. It was either that or lose his position at the company entirely when the board learned about his behavior toward you. Sometimes external consequences are necessary for internal growth. We have cleared out the children's bedroom at the estate, but not to erase them. Instead, we've created a space that celebrates who they are, photographs from their birthday parties, artwork they made with James, books that reflect their heritage as well as ours. It waits for them, if they ever want to come home. I know you are thriving in California. The private investigator I hired confirms that you are excelling in your studies, and that the children are happy and healthy. Yes, I hired someone, not to interfere, but to ensure that you had everything you needed. Old habits of protection die hard, even when they're misguided. I am not asking for forgiveness. I am not asking you to return. I am simply telling you that James's belief in this family's capacity for growth was not misplaced, even if it took losing you to prove it. The children have a trust fund that grows each month. But more importantly, they have a grandmother who is learning what it means to love without conditions, to welcome without reservations, to choose courage over comfort. If you ever decide that California is not enough, if you ever want to show Kai and Kaya that people can change, that families can heal, that love can be larger than fear, we are here. Not as the people who hurt you, but as the people your pain taught us to become. With all my love and deepest respect. Victoria. P.S. I have enclosed James's wedding ring. He would want Kai to have it someday, when he's ready to understand that love is the bravest thing we do. Amara sank onto her sofa, clutching James's journal and Victoria's letter, feeling the weight of possibility settle around her shoulders like a familiar blanket. The front door burst open with the controlled chaos of 2 energetic 5-year-olds home from a day of learning and playing. Mommy, guess what we did in art class? Kaya launched herself onto the sofa, followed closely by Kai. We made family trees, Kai announced. But ours looked different from everyone else's. Different how? Amara asked, though she could guess. Well, most kids have grandmas and grandpas on their trees. We put question marks where ours should be. Kaya nodded seriously. Mrs. Rodriguez said family trees grow in all different ways, and sometimes people find their family in places they didn't expect. Amara looked at her children, James's eyes, her determination, a future full of infinite possibility, and made a decision that felt like coming home. What would you say, she asked carefully, if I told you that maybe, just maybe, some of those question marks might not have to be question marks anymore? Both children went very still, their small faces serious with hope they were afraid to voice. Does that mean Grandma Vicky misses us? Kai asked quietly. It means, Amara said, pulling them both close, that sometimes people need time to learn how to love better. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, they figure it out before it's too late. That evening, as California sunshine painted their apartment walls gold, Amara composed a letter of her own. Victoria, the children would like to visit this summer. Not to move back, not to pretend the past didn't happen, but to see if the future might be bigger than we thought. James was right about one thing. Love does win eventually. But only when it comes with wisdom, with growth, with the willingness to do better. We'll see you in June. With cautious hope. Amora. Outside, cherry blossoms continued their ancient dance, falling and returning, ending and beginning, proving that even the most beautiful things must sometimes let go in order to bloom again.